Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. We're going to be taking a look at a specific legend from Riftbound, Sett. We're going to be going through today a bit of an overview of what this character is, how it plays, the key cards, and a sample deck list, and some further reading for you to do. The goal of today's video is to get you excited about Sett and interested to try it out. I personally think Sett is an excellent deck. It's probably sort of straddling that line between tier 1 and tier 2, as in I would conceivably want to play this at a tournament, but we're just lacking a little bit behind on the consistency or the upper ceiling in order to push us into, oh my god, we absolutely have to play this deck. But once you get into reading it, it's actually kind of an interesting deck. It is quite more skillful than you'd originally think. It kind of looks like the herder, push my guys in and just run you over, but you have to actually play the real advantage game over time where you are making exchanges that make sense and being aware of how your opponent can respond. You do have the superior stats, and that's what you have going for you. So what we're going to do today is just go through everything and see if we can get you on board and make you a believer as much as I am. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at Sett the Boss. Sett has a pretty unique ability. It's when a buffed unit you control would die, you can pay 1 power, exhaust me, and spend its buff to recall it exhausted again. Instead, you send it to base. It's not a move. That's important for certain cards that care about moving. And whenever you conquer, you can ready your legend. So basically, this says your buffed units don't die the first time they would die. And this is extraordinarily powerful. What we want to do then is take units that increase the amount of value you get the longer they're in play, or units that are just naturally really obnoxious and difficult to remove. We buff them up, we send them in, your opponent wastes a bunch of resources killing them, we spend some power and we get the unit back, and then we buff it again and send it back in, and we just start bullying them. Pretty much in par with how Sett actually plays in League of Legends as far as I'm aware. Sett comes in order and body, so yellow, orange. These colors, the strengths that you generally get is some pretty good buff cards. We have access to things like Call to Glory and stuff. I'll go over specific cards a little bit later, but we are very good on mobility, especially in Sett as we get our signature spell, which we'll talk about as well. We've got lots of ways of moving quite quickly and getting in with high numbers. We also get access to some of the best removal spells in the game. Our weaknesses include card draw. We're very bad at drawing additional cards. We kind of have to rely on our battlefields to do that. And of course, any battlefield you use, your opponent can use. So you have to keep that in mind when playing, that you can run out of steam. We're also very power hungry. Naturally, both of these colors are always trying to chew away at your power for all of their best cards. So you can end up with a very low rune count and you're trying to fight back against your opponent's 8-9 with 4. Your cards are good, but they're not better than 8 energy cards. And so you need to keep in mind when you're paying your power costs and how you're balancing that. So with that said, let's jump into some sample deck lists. I've got 2 that I've created, and then I'll give you an example of one that's been showing up in some tournaments. So this is the first list we're going to take a look at. This plays heavier to the order slant on our rune count. So we're going to be looking at playing heavier on yellow than orange. Our battlefields that we're choosing is the Windswept Hillock, the Monastery of Hirana, and Reaver's Row. These are all really, really great battlefields for Sett. Our Windswept gives units ganking, and we play units with superior stats, so it's very easy to just move them across and take both battlefields over 2 turns. So we basically get to save ourselves having to move back to base and move across. This is really, really great for a lot of our units, including our potential chosen champion, which we'll talk about in a moment. Really, really love Windswept. It's very good against some of the decks that are trying to play to a little bit of the later game because we can punish them by moving much quicker than them. Our next battlefield is probably our preferred battlefield, which is the Monastery of Hirana. In most cases, this is going to be one-sided. You can spend a buff when you conquer it to draw a card. There's a key card in our deck that makes that work as a ridiculous engine, and as we are not so good with card draw, this is one that our opponents are going to struggle to use because not all decks can use buffs, and we take battlefields very easily. So this is a very good one. It's just it can be a little bit tricky if we don't draw our key engine piece, Cyphria, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And last but not least, in this version, I'm playing Reaver's Row. Reaver's Row is an interesting choice. It's very much great in decks that want to protect the units, where you want to have an amass of units, or you've got very key units that you don't want getting killed. This means that a lot of the accelerate cards, things like Thousand-Tailed Watcher or Darius, are not going to be able to kill your key units whilst they are on the battlefield. You just get to bring them back, which then gives you moves to play additional. Basically, you get to use those units again for other things. We are on a 7-5 split. I would have liked to have gone 8-4, but when we start going through this deck list, you'll kind of get an impression of why that will be a little bit tricky. So we'll go through and we'll start with our chosen champion. We are playing 3 copies of Sett Kingpin. Sett Kingpin is actually broken in this game, and not enough people realize that. It's just a 5 might unit for 4 and costs 1 power, so it's on the curve that we're expecting. 4 energy for 4 stats and 1 power to buff that up. So we're at 5, but the effect on this card is absolutely bananas. It has tank, which means it has to be the first unit assigned damage, and then it gains +1 might for each buff unit at a battlefield he's at. So he counts himself. If you put a buff on him, he is a 7 might ridiculous tank. So you can just send that in, and in most cases that is going to slam over pretty much anything on curve. And most of the removals, 7 is a special number in this game, as a lot of the removals cap out at 6 damage, so it's going to force 2-for-1s. And then you have your ridiculous legend ability to just keep Sett Kingpin in play. With tank, you can push him forward with another unit that's buffed, and all of a sudden you have a 4 energy, 8 might unit, plus the little guy. And lots of people tend to forget that Sett has tank, so you can actually hold points really, really well. Multiple copies of Sett. Also, they count each other, so they also count themselves. So you end up with some ridiculous numbers for very low energy cost, which is exactly where we want to be if we're aggressively spending power to seize control of the early game. As our chosen champion, we always have access to this. We do have another Sett that we can choose that's good for different reasons, but we'll talk about that a little bit when we go into deck 2. Overall, Sett Kingpin is one of the strongest cards in the entire game for rule stats versus its energy cost. If you think about it, for Darius, you have to play Darius at 5, you have to pay a power, and then you have to play another card, or you basically have to play the second card per turn to ready it and get it to 7. We get 7 for this plus a buff, and it has tank. So absolutely absurd. And again, very good on Windswept Hillock, when you can just suddenly send that 7 might unit over to claim the Windswept, and then threaten to just move it over and clobber whatever on that other battle point, allowing us to double score. Sett, very, very strong, and it's a key unit to protect when you're playing through the game, so the more you keep it alive, the more your opponents have to dump a ton of resources into just trying to get this off the board. So that's where your Kai'Sa players are like throwing multiple copies of Falling Star at it, or Smokescreen Falling Star, and you get the combos where you can start whittling down their card advantage by focusing on protecting this unit. Our signature spell that we get to play in Sett is the Showstopper. Showstopper is a 1 energy, 1 power card, and that power can be paid by either order or body, which makes it very, very flexible in terms of your runes. You get to buff a friendly unit in your base, and then you get to move it to a battlefield. This allows you to take, for example, Sett Kingpin. If we're going second, we can play our 4 energy Sett Kingpin, play this, and then just send our 7 might unit over to immediately conquer. This gives us a lot of mobility, allows us to get our units to force accelerate effectively, and being able to get onto points very easily. So that's very good against more aggressive strategies, things like Victor, or if we're playing into Annie and we need to get moving much faster than we would normally be able to. Showstopper is great for this. It's also great if you send in the attack, you kill one of your opponent's big units, you use your Sett Legend ability to recall your unit back to base because it dies in the combat. Then you can play Showstopper to just send it straight back in, and if you succeed in that combat, we get to ready our Legend, and then we get to protect the giant unit we just sent back in. Showstopper is extraordinarily powerful, and this is an excellent signature card. Next, we're going to go over just some of the cool things that we have in the deck that are just generally strong in the colors they're in. Since we're playing body, we get to play Sabotage. This is very good into decks like Ari that wants to use Time Warp, or you want to know what combat tricks you're playing into. This is playable game 1 versus Kai'Sa. You can strip away their Falling Stars to try and reduce some of the pressure that they're able to apply with their removal suite, and it also tells you exactly how they're lining up. If their hand is unit heavy, when you can be aggressive, you play the bigger stat game. Effectively, Sett says, my guys are bigger than your guys, and they're very difficult to kill. And you stat check your opponent, and that's one of the strategies that you are playing in this deck. Sabotage is very good for giving you information. It does cost power, and again, as I mentioned before, power is a bit of an issue with this deck, so you do need to keep in mind how much you're spending, when you're spending, and what that's going to prevent you from doing a little bit later. One of our core engine cards is Cythria of Cloudfield. Cythria has an ability, every time you play a unit, you get to put a buff on her. The reason this is good, even though it's only a 1 might unit, is that you get to buff it every time you play a unit. So we can spend that buff for example, the battlefield, the monastery, and to draw additional cards and play units, and then we get more buffs on Cythria. Also, Cythria is very easy to just move into a point because we can protect her on turn 1 and then get her rebuffed. So she's a good unit to push out with. Very, very good turn 1 play. And also, if you push it out with Sett, all of a sudden you've got 10 might defending a point on your second turn, or potentially third turn. So that's very, very strong, as that will be a Dead Bloom Predator and give you a lot of runway. Cythria is very, very strong, and it plays into a lot of the other synergies, which we'll probably see a little bit more of in the second deck. But overall, excellent card, and we can also use this to pay for our cards like Call to Glory. Speaking of Call to Glory is a rather ridiculous card. This allows us to play it as a reaction, so we can play it at any time in response to things, and instead of paying its energy cost, we can actually pay a buff. This is where Cytherea comes in. She's always picking up the tab. You just go ahead, consume that buff, and then you throw this down, and you get +3 out of nowhere. You can play it from being tapped out, so your opponent always has to assume you have the ability to play this as long as there's a buff in play. It's a really, really great card, and anytime you can fit this in a deck, it's in the current metagame, it's 100% worth playing the maximum number of copies of this. Other decks like Leona are clamoring to play as many copies of this as possible. It's very, very strong, and your opponent can't ever wait for you to tap out. And then you also just got the option to just hard play it if you need to, which is just 3 energy plus 3 might. That's already what you'd expect in terms of stats to energy cost, and there's no power associated with it. This card just all around is incredible. A little bit more unique to other builds is that we are playing our Primal Strength. Primal Strength is, in my opinion, one of the better body cards. It costs 4 energy and a power, and it gives a unit +7 might. This will mean that you will run over pretty much everything from Volibear all the way down to Deckbuilding Predators or Anivias or a whole host of things, even through Master Yi buffs. The interesting thing with this card that you have to keep in mind is that it's not a reaction, it's an action. So if your opponent plays a removal spell like Voidseeker, this will not protect your unit. It will, however, allow you to absolutely batter most combats. And this allows you to get things like your Sett Kingpin up to 14 might on its own, or even higher if you've got multiple units. It lets you siege battlefields, and it just basically lets you hold control of them. It can get defied, and this is probably the best defied target your opponent can get in the game, but it's very, very strong and allows you to do what you're trying to do. When we go through like the units, we effectively pick rookies. This allows us to buff units like our Sett Kingpin. We're playing the Daring Poro. As we put a buff on this, it can attack for 4. It's just generally a good static unit for 2 energy. We play a Trifarian Glory Seeker. It can buff itself, which makes it quite resilient. We play First Mate, so we can ready our cards. The Arena Bar, it's always good to play just one of these. I don't like playing multiple copies, but it lets us buff friendly units whenever they're exhausted. So what we can do is move, for example, our units in, or we can play them and then immediately buff them with the Arena Bar. And then this will mean we can protect them with our Legend ability whilst also stat checking. Always worth playing one. For our units, our remaining units, we're playing Leona Determined. Leona is a 4-cost 1 power 4 might unit. It's got shield 1, so when it defends it gets +1, but the key thing with this is when it attacks, it gets to stun an enemy unit here, and stunned enemy units don't deal damage back. This is very, very good into Master Yi, which is one of the main decks in the format. It gives you very safe attacks. It's another one that we can just go ahead and Showstopper in, and it comes in with a buff, so it's attacking for 5, stuns your guy, and then in most cases you'll kill it, and even if you can't, you'll be then able to safely send other units in, and your opponent will not be able to deal damage back. This is a very good card, and it's very easy to side out if you are not playing into something that's very creature focused or where it's not very useful, but Leona is very, very powerful. Unfortunately, it does cost a power and it's competing with our Sett Kingpin, but there's times when this card will absolutely terrorize your opponents. And lastly, we're playing multiple copies of Kinku Monk, and this basically, whenever we play it, we can target up to 2 of our other units, and we get to buff them. We want as many buffs as we can possibly get in this game. It can't target itself, but it can target up to, so if you've only got one other unit that you want to buff, you can just go ahead and play the Kinku Monk. Very, very strong, and lets you do things, for example, like buff the Sett Kingpin and buff another unit and then send them both in for silly numbers. The key reason that we're on a heavy yellow slant in this deck is that we have Grand Stratagem. Grand Stratagem being the 6 energy spell. It is an action, so you can play it during showdowns, and it gives all units +5. This is another reason we're playing Reaver's Row, is that we get to keep our units alive, keeping them back in base, so we can send them out with Sett Kingpin, who has tank. And once we have a big enough critical mass, when we get towards the end of the game, so around 6 points, we can push out with Grand Stratagem and just slam over pretty much most things. And that's kind of all there is to say about the deck. We have the Hidden Blade, which is just very good whenever your opponent tries to accelerate a Watcher or something to that effect. We have Seals, which can be used to pay for our Sett Legend ability. So every time we save a unit, instead of paying a power, we can tap the Seal of Unity. We can also use it to pay all of our yellow power costs. All in all, very, very strong deck. It plays pretty fast, pretty early, and then it sort of controls that middle game with superior stats. And you do have a couple of options with things like Primal Strength to fight the late game. You do run out of cards though, so it's worth keeping in mind because of the lack of card draw. You don't really want to be playing the extreme late deck. So this is where you can run into trouble against Aurora, but your strategy against Aurora is to win before they get 2 Auroras in play. For our sideboard, we're playing 3 Unyielding Spirit, 2 Salvage, and 3 Salvage, and 2 Vengeance. The Unyielding Spirits, these are in our deck to protect us from Kai'Sa and other damage removals decks, so we're ideally bringing this in against anything with Fury in it. This makes it very hard for Kai'Sa to get efficient removals on your cards, and it can absolutely blow the game out when they go for a Cafian Rain, and you just go, haha, Unyielding Spirit, and then your guys survive. And then even if they do have other tricks, you just save them with your Legend ability. Salvage we're playing for dealing with the Aurora matchups, what we generally tend to do with those matches is potentially bring out the Leonas, because she's a bit small. We can bring in the Salvages. This will allow us to destroy the Baited Hook from Hook Darius or the Aurora, Dazzling Aurora. And then this will let us effectively actually play the game and not just get run over by a free unit every turn. Lastly, we're playing Vengeance. Because we're on a heavy order split on our runes, we can play the Vengeance to just straight up kill units. This is very good into things like Volibear Imposing, or just really big units that you need to remove in order to play the game. It catches a lot of people off guard because you can hit units in the base with this. Next, we're going to take a look at a different variant of the deck that I've put together, and then lastly, I'll show you a quick tournament list. So not too much more to go through, guys. Just we're going to give you a little bit of specs on some of the things that you can be doing with this deck. So this is the other version that I've been testing out and been having a ton of fun with. We play a 5/7 split with body. The main difference is being that we're playing Grave of the Godwillow because we're very good at holding with Sett Pit Boss. We play only one copy, Sett Kingpin in this deck. We only play the one copy. We're always playing Hillock, and our other location, or other battlefield in this case, is the Dreaming Tree, which means any of the cards that we play to target our cards, things like Call to Glory, are going to allow us to draw cards. So this gives us a lot more card draw to play with our superior stats. We play a copy of each of the sets, and we can change depending on what battlefield we're fighting over. For example, if we're on Grove of the Godwillow, Sett Kingpin's very reliable at holding. If we're on Windswept, we can play either depending on what the matchup is, as Sett Brawler can spend its buff to get +4 might, and then we can send it over and then gank with it, especially if we've got a way of readying this. And we also play the Dreaming Tree, which we've already talked about with all of our spells at target. This deck is designed to play into a very heavy Kai'Sa meta, so you're generally at a disadvantage. We accept that we're probably losing game 1 against Aurora in this deck for a superior Kai'Sa matchup, and the reason for that is we get the Unyielding Spirits in the main, which is just very difficult. They're not going to be expecting it, and they generally falling star straight into it, and this means we get to keep our units. A lot of our units are very much the same as before. One difference is we're playing Sorin Scout. This gives us additional runes. Main thing for this is that the ideal turn 1 play for Kai'Sa is 2-cost unit, and then leave 1 rune open, so that when you move your 2-cost in, they can Hextech Ray it. The Hawk is kind of the unit, if they've got Hextech, we want them to have, because then that's going to push us up quite dramatically in runes, and also drain removal sources from the opponent. It's all around just kind of very good in that early game, especially against Kai'Sa. One of the more unique spells that we're playing in this deck is Wallop. Wallop allows us to play it and ready a unit, but we can spend a buff to play it instead of actually paying its energy cost. This allows you to do really cool plays, such as Showstopper your unit into Windswept Hillock, then play the Wallop, ready that unit and move it across. Essentially, we're playing this instead of First Mate because it effectively costs 0 energy. If I get to spend more energy than you do, I'm probably winning that game. We are also taking a page from Tog's book. Tog is a player who's done extraordinarily well on the competitive circuit playing this Sett strategy, and they were playing Shen. I wasn't originally sold on this card, but once you're on a point with, say, Sett Brawler, and your opponent tries to overcommit to kill it, suddenly adding 5 power to defend that point is quite ridiculous. We can also protect our Sifrias, we can protect our Kingpins. It just comes in and just adds a ton of stats, and it only costs 3 energy to play this guy, so he's very, very strong. The rest is kind of the similar, but what we're actually also playing is 3 copies of Kiana, as we're on a heavier body split. We're able to actually pay these power costs, and if we buff this, it becomes very difficult for decks like Kai'Sa to deal with, and the deflect cost then starts making them pay energy, and then we're protecting it with our legend ability, so we really get to pressure them. We also get to play Fiora. Fiora very, very strong into for the same reasons. It gains deflect, ganking, and shield as long as it's buffed, which can make it very difficult for the opponent to get into it, and that ganking gives you a win condition where you can move it from battlefield to battlefield. And it has no power cost for a 4 might unit, so it's pretty good. Our side deck changes just a little bit. We go with 3 copies of Sabotage, we have 3 copies of Salvage, and then we have Leona specifically for mid-range Master Yi, or some of the more low-to-the-ground aggro decks that we just want to run over pretty quickly. Now, for the last deck I'm going to show you, we're going to talk a little bit about something that's already been doing quite well in tournaments. So this was a first place deck that we found on Piltover Archive. It's a resource we strongly recommend, and this was playing a 5/7 split. Locations very similar to what we've seen. Our battlefields is Grave of the Godwillow, Windswept Hillock, Monastery. We're playing 1 Sett Kingpin, so we have the opportunity to take this as our chosen champion. In our later games, we get 3 copies of Sett Brawler, and the deck is largely the same. Challenge is very, very good, especially if you're playing Sett Brawler, because you can use the effect to pump the setup, use the challenge to kill a unit, and then we can send Sett in to beat something else up. Challenge also lets you hit units in base, which makes it very, very effective at dealing with decks that are trying to set up a long-term strategy. The rest is very, very similar, but we are playing Misfortune, who can ready units. Or we can ready cards, actually. So we can use it to, for example, ready Arena Bar. If we've already used it, we can ready our Sett Legend, our Sett Boss, which will mean we can protect more units. It also has ganking, so it acts as a win condition. We're maxing out on our deflect cards, so this just gives us a lot of... Basically makes us really annoying into Kai'Sa as we get card advantage from Qiyana. We can use it to ramp as well if we know that we're already winning, and so that all of their removal then becomes even more expensive. And there's 2 copies of Lee Sin Centered, who's actually excellent here. You can accelerate this out. It has 0 power cost for its base version, and other buffed units at my battlefield just get +2 might. So you send that in with Sett Kingpin, all of a sudden you're hitting, what's that? If just the Sett is buffed, they're at 7, 8, 9, and then you send this in, you're getting 15 off of 2 units, and then if this is buffed, it's 17 because of Sett Kingpin's effect. So very, very strong card. I really, really like this, and it fits into a heavier body strategy, effectively. So that's basically everything there is to know about the Sett decks. In terms of matchups, you are... Against Kai'Sa, you're playing around the fact that your units are very hard to remove and that you stat check them very, very well. So a lot of their early games, like Ravenbloom Student, you're going to force them to have to play removal. The way you win the match is you force them to spend about 2 cards to try and threaten one of your cards. And then if you have buffs, you then make them replay that exchange. Eventually, they run out of cards. You just have to not let them get ahead of you too far on score early, because they do have the ability to accelerate and take you down out of randomness. By the time you stabilize, they might just be able to go, Thousand Tail Watcher, run over your board, and that can get pretty tricky. So you want to be trading them point for point and forcing them to spend more of their cards to deal with your units whilst you batter their units in combat. Against Aurora, we want to play quite quickly, so this is more aggressive uses of cards like Showstopper. We're quite happy to Showstopper Qiyana in, especially on Windswept, where we then get to conquer the Windswept, get a point, get ourselves a trigger, and then gank over with the Qiyana, and then score again. We're happy to just basically take a lot of fast points very, very quickly. We want to get to about 5 points before the first Aurora trigger. And then from there, we want to win the game as quickly as possible, especially if we haven't sided yet and we don't have access to our salvages. We just want to run them over before they get too many triggers out. The longer the game goes on with the triggers of the Aurora, the harder it is for you to win, as we do eventually run out of steam and they're getting their threats for free. So play aggressively, take a look at your opponent's potential responses, but if you have to take a risk to close out a game, it's better to do it earlier than it is to do it later against Aurora, just by virtue of eventually they end up with like 32 power on a point, and then even when you've got like something like Grand Stratagem, if you're playing it, it can be pretty tricky. But this is where cards like Vengeance lets us just strip away some of their really, really big units to allow us to just keep scoring and keep that pressure on. Against more aggressive decks like Annie, for example, it's just a case of my guys are bigger than your guys, and I just have to make sure I match your speed, and I don't let you run me over, and then just keeping an eye out for the Vi Ride the Wind combo that comes up a little bit later. I think that's enough to give you an idea of how to play the set. We will get some games on this channel in the near future, but we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Are there certain builds of Sett that you really like? Are there questions that you have? Are there anything that you'd like to impart onto other players? We'd love for you to do it down in our comments below, but we'd also be equally as appreciative if you come over to our Discord server, the Riftbound and Chill server, where we do weekly tournaments like our Bandle Blitz. Basically, you can come along and get a bunch of advice directly from myself and the other players as we all work together to get ready for tournaments and the release. I think Sett is a ton of fun to play and is going to do really, really well in tournaments, especially when it finds a good pilot. For us, that's going to be everything today, but we really hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.